My name is Iman. I'm from ICA section. My story is called Moses and Khidr. Perhaps you love a thing and it is bad for you, and perhaps you hate a thing and it is good for you. The occurrence of a small misfortune is the prevention of a much larger calamity. This is one quote I live my life by. My story is based on this quote. The setting of the story is in Egypt. The main protagonists of the story are Moses and Khidr. One day, as Moses was giving a sermon, and someone from the crowd asked him, "Who is the most knowledgeable person on earth?" Moses replied, "I am the most learned." Immediately there came a revelation. Verily, there's a person who has been given knowledge that you do not have. Moses humbled himself and asked to meet this person and learn from him. This shows his humility and humbleness. He instantaneously lowered himself for the sake of knowledge. Moses was told to put a fish in a basket, and when the fish disappeared, he would find the person he is seeking. He followed the instructions and did as required. When he came across the place where two oceans meet, he met a man wearing a hood covering his face. He was Khidr, a man given knowledge no man before him ever had, and no man after him would ever be granted. Moses requested Khidr if he could follow him and join his journey and learn from him. This shows the importance of practical knowledge, and that is far more greater than the knowledge gained by books. Moses requested him, and Khidr finally agreed to let him come on one condition, that Moses does not interfere with Khidr's actions and does not ask him about anything till he himself mentions it. As they go along their journey, they come across a river and have no means to cross it. They find a poor fisherman who offers to help them cross the river. While the fisherman is busy, Khidr makes a hole in the fisherman's boat that's just big enough to let them get across without drowning. While the fisherman mourns for the damage, Khidr and Moses escape. Moses becomes infuriated and asks Khidr, how could he do that to someone who was so generous to them? Khidr replied, "Didn't I tell you? You have no patience." Moses apologized and they continued on their journey. They went further ahead and came across some kids playing on the shore. Khidr takes hold of one of the boys and kills him. Moses is taken back by the horrifying sight. The taking of an innocent life is a big deal. Moses questions him and asks about his actions. Khidr replies with the same statement as earlier, "You have no patience." Moses apologized again and asks for a last chance. Khidr forgave him once again and went on with the journey. Both of them, tired and hungry, reach a village. Hospitality is one of the basic aspects of mankind, and during the time of Moses, it was a custom to host the strangers who came to a town or a village. This village was so stingy they refused to share a cup of water and a loaf of bread to the strangers. Moses and Khidr were instead humiliated and kicked out. While they were on the outskirts, Khidr saw a wall. Every town had a wall for safety purposes. This wall was, however, damaged, and Khidr began repairing and reconstructing it. Moses got irritated and asked, "Why would you help the people who humiliated and kicked us out?" Khidr said, "You have not been patient, hence this is where we part ways. Now I shall tell you what you had no patience to understand." Khidr said, "The ship belonged to a poor fisherman, and there was a tyrannical king who was confiscating every ship for his navy. By putting a hole in the ship, it was made undesirable to the king. The fisherman later fixed it up and continued with his livelihood. By damaging the ship, I saved the ship for the poor man. The poor man showed generosity. Through the ship, his vehicle of generosity was preserved. The very act of generosity became his salvation." The frustration and anger of the fisherman would have been unimaginable to realize the people he helped damaged his ship. Later, he saw the king confiscate every ship of every fisherman in the entire city except his ship. His frustration instantaneously flipped over to relief that someone had damaged the ship. He later explains the death of the child. The child would grow up and be cruel and tyrannous and criminal and a nuisance to the righteous parents and the world. We see this with the case of Hitler. Wouldn't every person who went through the Nazi apocalypse wish that Hitler was never born? Khidr later explains the final incident of the wall and the people of the town. Khidr tells them that the portion of the wall he built belonged to two orphan kids. Their father was a righteous man. He buried treasure for his children, and the treasure happened to be under the wall. If the wall collapsed and the treasure was revealed, the townspeople would have looted it. So Khidr rebuilt the wall so it would stand till the orphans grew up and defended themselves. By concealing the wealth, he was protecting the orphans from being oppressed by the townsmen. The story starts with two oceans meeting and ends with two oceans parting, Moses being the ocean of revelation and Khidr being the ocean of knowledge. The main moral of the story is that the occurrence of a small misfortune is the prevention of a much larger calamity. Because we are short sighted and look at the immediate outcome, we don't realize there's a wisdom we don't know about. The calamity is protecting you from a bigger calamity. Perhaps you hate a thing and it proved good for you. There might be people in our lives who do terrible things to us, and even when we do good to them, or when we be going through some uncomfortable circumstances or hardships, we got to take a step back and remind ourselves perhaps we hate a thing and it is good for us, and perhaps we love a thing and it is bad for us. This tragedy that we hate so much is the cause for a greater good. We must always have hope and stay positive and have faith that the tiny discomfort may be a shield against something bigger. Another lesson we learn from the story is that we must always seek knowledge, from the cradle to the grave. We should accept the truth from any knowledgeable person and learn and study from any person who is more knowledgeable than us, no matter what their ethnicity, age, background, or culture is. The third lesson we can derive is that the very act of generosity becomes the fisherman's salvation. The bow fisherman helped the strangers without expecting anything in return, but the act of atrocity proved to be an act of generosity for him. Most of the time, our kindness is not reciprocated, or sometimes we get a worse feedback. But we must overlook such circumstances and realize that our kindness will one day pave a path for something wonderful that would have not been written for us if it weren't for the pain we endured. Thank you.